Okay, pillar 2 is about driving scale, essentially making deployments more profitable. So this focuses on 3 areas for now. Merchant payments, which is initially about QR-based push and developing models for merchant acquiring, whether it be via a mobile wallet or even in the longer term an MFI, where that MFI is focused on small business. There's PISP, and I think there's 3 areas within PISP that we need to be considering in the immediate term. Merchant request to pay, so it's essentially fintech powered retail. Bill payments, so essentially developing some sort of additional support for aggregators, for example. And salaries, which implies support for bulk through the PISP interface. And I think we saw yesterday that bulk via PISP is already on the roadmap for the Mojib community. Also, bulk itself, it's nearly there, but there's still work to be done, particularly on the payee side. So again, that's something that we'll focus on in the next PI or 2, probably more urgently for bulk at the bottom. And I think I've tried to illustrate in this diagram how these things all overlap. So merchant payments can be fintech powered retail through 3PPI. It could be a cross-sectoral scheme-based push payment model, more akin to a Visa or a MasterCard. 3PPI can support salaries and bill payments, but so can bulk. So there's a lot of interaction between these 3 pieces. And so let me ask the question again. In terms of driving up scale, are there other priorities that I'm missing here? Okay, fine. We'll accept that as sufficient for now. We have a question.
Just a quick question. The topics you have, for what time frame is this pillar looking to have these topics, like more work on these areas?
Let's come to that in the road mapping session at the end.
Okay.
Is that Amit? Is that Amit?
Yes, that's me.
Yes,
why I'm asking this question is, again, maybe I'm thinking a bit too loud here. There is in more smaller and still relatively internet connective as underdeveloped market areas, including in India, for example, there is a pilot by RBI to make a UPI through IVR, not through an active internet connection. I'm not sure if it's a good idea or not, but the reason by asking was like, these things are more like, this is our focus for the next 2, 3, 4 years, and then we'll look how the market developed in terms of innovations and the needs.
For the moment, I haven't been considering that. We need to just go through where we think is the mass market for the moment. That may be something that we need to do in the future, Amit, but I haven't got it as one of the roadmap items. Rest assured, we will be reviewing this at future community meetings and adding or subtracting from the roadmap. We're just baselining today. If you think it's important that we get that in at an early stage, then please say so, and we'll try and get it onto the roadmap at some point. What would you think?
I don't really have an answer to it. I can pose a question that we are hearing a lot when we are trying to get especially MFI as DFSP to participate in the WinePay scheme in Myanmar is they say, yeah, digital payments sound great, it's a good story, but the reality is, even if when we are working with select wallets, 75 to 80% of our wallet transactions are agent assisted or in a version of OTC. So then they ask, like, would, say if we start using services through WinePay as opposed to bilateral arrangement, could our clients still bring cash and do cash in and cash out, and could those messages and transaction be actually processed? So some questions are coming from those aspects as well. So I don't know. I don't know the answer. I thought I'll bring it up here.
Yeah, it is an omission that I had intended, but I somehow managed to forget. I needed to put USSD-based payment under merchant payments as well. It's probably because I'm allergic to USSD, but yeah, it needs to be in there. And that's part of the answer, Amit. I recognize it's not the complete answer. Yeah, okay. Let's consider that. We can talk about that later. I'll add that to the list.
Paul, real quick, two things. One I would say is on the voice thing, India is definitely going after it. And we were supposed to have the COO of NPCI actually talk about that program, because I told her there's no way anybody in Mojaloop would believe me. So it has to come from her. Because I don't think we're not on that for this year. I don't even think NPCI
we're not.
But it is definitely something, heads up. It's something that India thinks is coming. They're investing a lot in it. But remains to be seen. Let's give them a year to see if it works before we invest anything in it personally.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say, Paul, on this is before I give it back is this is fine for this list, but I may argue with you that bulk goes under pillar 3, but we can talk about that another time.
Okay, fine.
Paul,
I am really surprised about the IVR piece, definitely, or the voice piece. Yeah. It feels like a retrograde step.
But Paul, but it helps with the ID. It's not real great, but that's what everybody's looking at is the identification aspect of that. So that's why they're going in that direction.
Okay.
Hi, Paul. This is Julia again. Just one question. So for me, the work we are doing on ISO 222, it's also to achieve scale. Can I ask why is it not featured on this slide?
That's a good point. I suppose I regarded it as part of the quality product piece at the bottom. That it's something that you have to have in order to support pillars 1, 2, 3. It's kind of core infrastructural piece. Would you disagree with that? Would you regard it as a product enhancement in particular around achieving scale? I'm quite happy to add it here if you feel it's more appropriate.
No, I think I'm okay with those, but I see Michael has designed that.
Michael, what would you think?
Thanks. My feeling is it probably go in the 3rd pillar. One of the things we're trying to do is to use an ISO 20022 implementation. And one of the reasons we're concentrating so hard on trying to make it something which is adopted by the broader community is so that we can use ISO 20022 messages in the new format as vehicles for institutions outside Mojaloop schemes to interact with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. I'm quite happy to add it into one of the pillars. This is actually the point of this session. I kind of thought it would be in the underlying quality product piece, but fine. If we feel it's in pillar 3, that's great. So let's move straight on to pillar 3, unless there are any other questions here.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so this is about interconnectivity with other systems, which is why I'd assumed that Julie and Michael both think that ISO 222 should be in here. That's fine. So this was around cross-border, and there's at least 3 issues here that we have to consider. One is updating our settlements systems, improving them to sort of something that's appropriate for the more complex world that we are trying to enter, where we are interoperating with other systems. And at least in part, we need that in order to support foreign exchange. There's developments around foreign exchange that are needed that Michael has talked about multiple times, and the requirement hasn't gone away. We really need it. And then there's questions of payment addressing. If you're sending money from one country to another, particularly if you're doing it as an individual, a low value payment, how do you address that payment in countries where there might be shared SIMs or multiple wallets on a SIM? So moving away from assuming that we are dealing with an M-Pesa type solution where one account equals one mobile phone number, making it more flexible. And that fits in well with some of the other work here around payments addressing in using MOSIP national IDs and the integration into the emerging DPG ecosystem piece. So we want to be able to be a good citizen in the DPG community. So we need to explore integration with MOSIP for payments addressing, support for MOSIP in the Oracle environment to allow a MOSIP token to be used for payments routing, and we need a better understanding of how MOSIP manages identity, because they do have some interesting approaches to ensuring customer or citizen confidentiality, at least amongst service providers, of which we would be one. We need to update our integration with MIFOS. MIFOS, to be honest, the vast burden of that falls on MIFOS rather than us. They've just allowed things to get out of date a little. OpenG2P needs to have some sort of integration with our Oracle, our ALS, in order to support the beneficiary management functionality. So there's a lot of work to do there. And I put in here an opportunity for thought leadership on the integration of DPGs. I hope there aren't too many people from other DPGs here, but my experience in working with DPGs so far has been, if you get a bunch of representatives in a room, they all mill around looking for somebody else to take the lead. So if we're willing to take the lead, we can influence a lot, particularly around the Oracle and its applicability, and how we feel the best way of linking all these things together is. We need to work with within international ecosystems. We need to think what that means. If we're talking about subnational switches like WinePay, for example, and the main switch within a country is Vocalink or CMA or whatever it may be, then we need to have a means of integrating with that national switch. So we need to do some thinking around that, particularly around questions of transaction integrity, transaction security, settlement, and all those issues that Michael gets worked up about. Sorry, Michael. And then there's wholesale CBDC coming along the track, and we have Nick and his Center of Excellence in Singapore. That needs to be in this pillar. And then finally, compatibility with Interledger as it has developed in recent months and years, and how it will develop in the future. And we need to make sure that we're in step with that. So again, open to the floor. What am I missing? Apart from ISO 20022.
Sorry, Paul, this is not an ISO 20022 intervention again, but it's to talk about some of the work, or not necessarily talk about. We've been doing some work recently, as you know, with GIZ about what form a government payment building block might take, and one of the important characteristics of a block like that, which has come home to us, is that it will probably, in a number of jurisdictions, have to integrate multiple payment execution systems,
Yeah.
in the sense that Mojaloop is a payment execution system. Now, we've tended to think, and I think people generally have tended to think that the work of establishing a single payment execution system is something that we can just assume. But I don't think that's the case. Certainly the examples that we've seen suggest that it's not the case. On the other hand, we in the Mojaloop community have a strong track record of integrating the payment execution systems who are our participants. So we might, I think, look at whether we can do an extension of that kind to be able to provide people with, as I say, an overarching payment execution system where there are multiple centers of payment execution. I mean, an example, I guess.
You mean a switch of switches?
I might do. But I'm just thinking, I mean, for instance, in Tanzania, as we know, there are aggregators who provide services to small institutions and effectively form a payment execution system of their own.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And congratulations to the TIBS team for the ambition that says they're going to integrate the existing aggregators and not simply try and replace them. And I think that's going to be the right decision in lots of jurisdictions, and we should, I think, be thinking about how we might do something there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, okay, fine. That could be added in.
Any other comments? Yes, Tom.
Thanks, Paul. On the integration with MIFOS, some of that work is going on now, as you and I know, Sam.
Yeah.
My idea was we should set that up as a standing demo within the sandbox or within Miniloop or some way that somebody can actually easily. I looked at MIFOS, we can package that up. Is this the sort of thing you're talking about, or am I just...
Yeah, exactly. This is about doing that integration, packaging it up, and being able to demonstrate it, because what's the G2P Connect team, which is kind of the overarching umbrella organization here, informal organization. They went off to Washington and did a lot of talking, and it was very interesting listening to some of the reaction of potential partners within the payments and the G2P world. And out of that, they came the G2P Connect team came away talking about 3 potential proof of concept deployments, 3 national deployments of MOSIP, MIFOS, OpenG2P, Mojaloop, and 2 or 3 other DPG projects. And that is something that may be coming down the line in the next 3 months, at least one of them. And that's where I'm trying to head with this. And we do have an opportunity to take a leading role there, simply because I think we're more focused than a lot of the other DPG projects.
Yeah, that's is really good. I think we should put our best foot forward. I definitely don't think we should use Miniloop. We should use a proper deployment, because there's under no circumstances. Cybrin will remind us that when they deployed a system and tried to make it public and accessible, it took them hours to get hacked. So rather use
I
use an
completely
Azure
agree with you,
system
Warren.
or use a ISC system. Those things we can switch on, switch off as quick as you like nowadays.
Yeah.
I don't think that should be the limiting factor.
Yeah, that's the real strength, the real benefit of IAC, in my view. Yeah.
And I think the MIFOS stuff, we need to go back and chat to them a little bit about what's moved on now in terms of all the SDK features and things like that. Because we did very, very many years ago before COVID say, hey guys, if you use the SDK that everybody else is using, then actually that builds on and leverages things more usefully. It would be a part, Mifos's dreams are bigger, but it should certainly be a part of the solution that they explore for their merge loop connection. So how to use the merge loop connector to get Mifos doing it. We don't want, the more people we have using the same thing, and the more the same thing is used for test, that is used, is packaged up for production. I have Pedro in my ear reminding us that let's not have different things, but have the same thing in different scales. We need to try and do that at this point. We don't have time to be distracted by doing it the hard way.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, the initial G2P Connect deployment used Miniloop because our discussions with G2P Connect were, this is a demo system. That's what Miniloop is for. Once they get to proof of concept and it's a national deployment, yeah, it needs to be a proper merge loop deployment. I quite agree, because we don't want to risk the reputation of security simply through making a minimalist deployment which isn't fit for purpose. I would agree. Okay, any other comments on this?
Yeah, sorry, another one from me, I'm afraid. Can we go back to a previous pillar? Pillar 2, that is. Because it occurred to me that one of the things that we kind of talked about but never really did anything about was AISP.
That's true. Yeah, I kind of given up talking about that because I didn't really get much response from anyone.
Hey, you got a response from me.
Okay, fine. Let's get it on the road.
Well, I mean, in a bill pay environment, and there are all kinds of other environments like recording subscriptions and things like that, government tax payments, all of those kinds of things, where some form of sophisticated AISP ability on the lines of a PISP ability will be an important scale factor for us.
Yeah. I would agree. It's just let's get it on the roadmap. As I say, exhaustion with repeatedly typing the AISP and nobody actually picking up on it, it kind of led me to let it drop off the edge. But that's fine. Let's get it on the roadmap. You're quite right.
Okay, one more question.
Thanks. I'm not sure yet whether this would fall under pillar 2 or 3, but when it comes to, let's say, cash outs, ATM cash outs, for instance, right? Because there was a product in Rwanda, one bank was running this, I think it was called Easy Cash from BPR. They were cashing out from ATMs, right? So here my point would be, since we are talking about integration through ISO 222, we should also be thinking about integration through ISO 8583, which is what most of these old legacy switches are using.
It's the ATM protocol. Yeah. We did actually talk about this about a year or so ago. Steve, where did those discussions get to? I can't remember.
We did do a POC. I mean, a few of you were in the room for that. We did do a POC on ATM cash out using 8583. So we'll send you those links so you can see where we got to, but I don't think it ever got productionized. So I think that is something interesting. And then the other thing, just in general, pillar 3 of connecting to the outside world, one of the interesting things is, as much as we're laggards for some of the world on 2022, there's a lot of people in the world who are much more laggards than us. And if we can find a way to bridge those worlds, I think that's a very valuable place for us to be.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah.
8583. Yep. All right. Oh, Michael wants to go again, Paul. 1 sec.
Hi, Michael.
I just want to say that one of the things we have got is internal modular loop functionality that enables, for instance, to get people to get an authorization at the ATM via an OTP, that kind of thing. So it'd be possible for people who are running a modular loop scheme to have their own internal modular loop based way of managing that without needing to go 8583.
Okay, Paul, all yours.
Sorry, just need to pursue that. Michael, how would that work if you weren't actually talking to the ATM?
You talk to the bank that owns the ATM.
And they talk to the ATM.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you can issue, we've got an authorizations endpoint, which enables us to send something to that bank saying, you know, please ask, you know, at the ATM, please ask the customer to enter the OTP, which
Yeah.
is the voucher number or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That can be entered. The bank returns it to the customer's FI, and the customer says that's good the customer's FI says good authorization, I can go ahead and make the payment.
That's pretty much how M-Pesa did it way back when.
Get out of town.
Yeah. Okay, fine, cool. Right, fine. Now it's over to the various people I emailed, asked them to talk about the different tasks. So I hope people are ready. I did put a running order out last night. I'd adapted it from the initial version based on the discussion over the last few days. So sorry for the last minute changes. I don't think there was any major changes, but trying to learn from what I'm hearing. So over to first is John Mathura talking about the adoption toolkit, and he's got 5 minutes max. John, are you in the room?
Yeah, he's walking to the mic.
Okay, cool. Sorry, it's postage stamp size picture of the room. It's difficult to pick out people.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone.
Hi, John. Hi.
So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the adoption toolkit and then focus on those 3 points that Paul has on the screen on dependencies, when ready to start, and the size of the task. So just to give a quick summary of all we've discussed and some of the points we've not discussed on the adoption toolkit, I will also ask Steve and Jane to supplement anything I omit in the last 1 minute I have. So we'll look at what is it, what should it look like, what could it include, and then examples of those, as well as who we think are likely to be involved, as well as anyone else who would like to volunteer. So it should be a roadmap to guide adopters, a kind of a starter pack that helps them move with an adoption from the idea and the concept to going live. And ideally, it should be a roadmap of decisions so that they have guidance and help at each decision point. Ideally, what should it be? Visual, descriptive, and very useful for an adopter. As several people have said, it doesn't have to be technical, but it should be useful for non-technical adopters. So regulators, stakeholders, you know, the broad spectrum of stakeholders we have. And it should also, very importantly, be customizable by adopters in terms of what they choose as their order of their roadmap and order of prioritization. It could include documents, templates, and checklists, step-by-step guides for each of those decision points. In some cases, might include SOPs for some of those engagements. And then examples will be a stakeholder identification. Who are our stakeholders? What are their roles? What and how should we engage with them? How regularly? So for example, with regulators, who's the regulator? When should we engage with them on what? And what's the cadence or frequency of engagement with them with particular goals in mind? The same applies for the different types of stakeholders. Look at governance models, look at scheme rules, how to set up partnership, and you know what to consider when setting up partnerships. And these are just examples of things that should be in there. Use cases, potential ones for particular implementations, because different ones will choose a use case or a certain combination of use cases and different order of implementing them. And then RFP structure, for example, because Mojaloop is not the other systems, and so it will need very specific considerations. Onboarding tools have been discussed, and how do we incorporate those to some extent? And then which of these aspects are more relevant for a POC and which are more relevant for going live? Tom mentioned a consideration of a TCO assessment of a comparison of managed service versus on-prem implementation. What of those will be relevant? So as we look at this, the question is, which of those do we need to do to start with in this PI? Because we can't do all of it. And so I know Paul did mention he's willing to be part of this. He's volunteered Steve, Warren, Jane. He's volunteered Julie as well. I thought someone from WinePay, given their experience, could be involved, and that could either be Connie or Kopie. And I think we could also volunteer Olivier Manji. But would anyone else be interested in working on this work stream? Could we start with that? And then we'll look at what are the specific goals we'll have for this PI, and then what dependencies we have, and when we might be ready to start. Any additional volunteers that I've not mentioned? I see Michael Richards' hand up. I see Tsedi's hand as well. Going, gone. Or is it going, gone? Anyone else? Thank you. So Steve, over to you.
I think you covered everything. The couple points I want to make is that as you go through that list, a lot of us in this room would say that already exists. And we've heard that when we talk about this problem for the past 2 years. The answer is always that already exists. Well, I don't know where it is. So that means that most of you don't know where it is. And most of our adopters aren't going to know where it is. So it's a matter of, it's probably, we think around 60% of this already exists. But what we need to work on is packaging it in a clear way. And to Julie's point earlier, there's the 30-second, this is what you need to know. Then there's the 2-minute, this is what you need to know. Then there's the 5 next level people. Okay, here's the 2-minute version for this person, the 2-minute version for this person, the 2-minute version. And so we need to find a way to break this down. So I would say what I hope we accomplish this time is, first, what's the structure? What does this thing look like? It's not just a collection of documents that are all online that you need to find. We need to figure out what does the structure of this thing need to look like. The other thing is that big question of what is Moduloop? I mean, the 30-second version and the 2-minute version and the 5-minute version, that is the opening scene of the adopter toolkit. I think that's something we need to accomplish on this PI, and it's actually already on our roadmap for this in something we're calling the executive series. And so that's already planning. So I think the structure and the format and the content in terms of what we want it to look like, what we want to be in it, should be this PI. And that first section, which is the introduction, should be in this PI. So that's my take, and I hope you guys come along with me.
Okay, I'm calling a halt there. That's more than 5 minutes on that one. Sorry. Okay,
Paul,
go.
sorry, can I just add
Hi,
my
Jane.
2 cents? Thank you,
Yeah.
Paul. So I think it's really important to just reiterate something that Steve touched on there, which is, as a community, we've got a lot of information and a lot of documents and a lot of templates already. So let's not start at the beginning and redo everything. Let's do an audit and look back at discovery of what we've got and make sure that we understand where to fit all that stuff in so we don't duplicate effort. And the other thing is that I don't like the name Adopter Toolkit. That's my own personal thing. I think it makes people think immediately about a technical something, and it's more of a guide. It's more of a something. So we need a good name for this thing. And secondly, when we talk about tools, we're not talking about onboarding tools as in payment managers and things like that. We're talking about participatory information and
engagement plans, timetables.
Engagement plans. And it's also not just about the regulator. We've been very fixated on the regulator this morning, but there are other stakeholders and other activities that happen besides the regulator. Yes, they're important, but there are the participants in the scheme. There are those things as well. So this guide needs to encompass every aspect that we understand about setting up a scheme of whatever size. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jane.
Over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next one, it's about the portals, the hub, the payment manager, the payment, any other portals. And I've asked Koang from DataWorks to talk about this. Are you there?
On his way up.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry. Actually, I'm not really sure about how this thing was because this is my first time here. But regarding this portal, in our one page presentation, we already described about this thing, that the DFSP portal, because we came out with the requirements based on our operation teams. Right now, our operation team has to do all these settlement reporting things, sending the reports to our DFSP daily using the manual work. So we came up with this idea to build this DFSP portal. In terms of the dependency, we do not have any dependency because this is the quite new portal. We are just directly accessing the central ledger database to extract the reporting information. When it might be ready to start, we have already started designing, just need to start the development only. And the size of the task, it could be medium or large because we estimate around 5 months to complete this one. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move swiftly on because we are really late. I'm going to ask David Fry to talk about what we can do to ease deployments, how we can maybe make the IAC more approachable, etc., and what work we need to do to facilitate on-prem deployments.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, David.
So my brief approach to this would be to extend what I talked about the last convening, where it was we presented the cloud agnostic version of the IAC. I think that forms the basis of the three types of deployments that you were talking about. Right now, we have the AWS deployment that uses the IAC out of the box. The logical extension of that would be to use a cloud provided Kubernetes cluster, so a managed Kubernetes using the same IAC. So the way that I refactored the code lends itself to be used either with a managed Kubernetes or a similar approach using a different cloud provider. So either Azure or GCP. And the last extension would be to do that on-prem. So to me, there's still refactoring that has to happen to support that easily. And we're talking about ease of adoption. So there does need to be some additional work to make it easier to understand and to extend, more modular. And there's some refactorings of the bootstrap to support these multiple cloud providers. But I think to me, that's the easiest way to have a completely open source distribution of IAC on any platform, including on-prem. And so that's my high level description of how we can accomplish those three things. So in terms of sizing of those tasks, I have had not enough time to look into it, but okay. I'm open to questions and different approaches about how we would go about doing this.
Okay, but I mean the details will be thrashed out in subsequent meetings, so we're just trying to get an idea of how to put this on a timeline for the moment. So thank you, David. That's great.
Okay.
Okay. Next up is Tom to talk about how we could use Miniloop and when and where we might apply it.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I think you asked me to talk about demonstrations, but also there was a bullet there about QA. and
Yeah.
some of our process. So, you know, what's the need was your bullet point. Why do we need mini loop? Actually, it'd be really good. You remember I talked about mini loop and I said it's not the plane, it's not the trip to Zanzibar, it's actually just the road and the taxi. It'd be great that if in 12 months time we're not actually talking about mini loop at all, because it's just basically how you get Mojaloop. So just remember that, you know, I'm not making it, none of us should make a career out of our deployment options here, right? Because that's not the goal. So with that said, what it's trying to do, and what David and I have been doing jointly, we've been trying to democratize the access to Mojaloop. Because as somebody who came in after, a lot of you may know, Lewis, I was learning about what he was doing and very much learning about the payments infrastructure. But from a technology point of view, now I'm only talking technology, right? We need to democratize the access to the technology. Sorry, we need to democratize the access to the functions of our software by actually taking away the impediments of the technology. That's what David's trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do at different levels. So the need is to democratize, educate, and enable, and to make the switch, make the technology, make the problem solution accessible. That's why, Warren, just to address your point, I don't really care how we get MeFOS integrated with MOSIP, which integrated with Mojaloop. I don't care how we make that available to people, right? It's the making it available to people. And that's all I was checking on, Paul, is that's what we're talking about, is making that so that another DFSP or another provider can come on. So I think let's keep that end goal really, really in mind. You then asked, what are the dependencies? I think some of it is some learning. We need to take Sam and others have come up to speed with MOSIP. I think I need to come up to speed with MOSIP. I need to come up to speed with integration and with the simulators, things that are already in there, or other people to join with this effort, so that we can actually package up MeFOS with MOSIP with Mojaloop and either make it so that anybody can deploy it for demo, for whatever, right? So that we can learn and give access, and we can show the concrete vision of how you, Mr. Wakala, with your point of sale machine, might benefit from this whole infrastructure. Okay, or the gentleman from the insurance company, or any other part of the finance ecosystem. What are the dependencies? That's a dependency. I think we need a couple of us to come up with a speed with the technology and to overlap with the application, the business problem. DA93 and the process, that list of things that we're testing in our processes, I think we need to finish off that list of what we test, test what we release what we test, so that we actually have a good contract with our people that are downloading and using this, and we're making good use of their time. And when are we starting? Well, there's already a team working on MeFOS and Mojaloop integration, bringing that. I've looked at packaging up MeFOS, just like we've done with Mojaloop, with using Miniloop. Maybe I can actually add that in. So this is already happening. And the cool news is there's a group even outside of this room already working on that. So I think this is real, Paul. This is happening. And thank you. I got to give a little bit of credit to here. Paul's herded the cats and done the diagrams and actually creating something. As far as my limited view of this is, he's actually heard, and what that means is like trying to arrange your kids, you know, a whole classroom of kids and a disordered bunch of people. He's rounded them up, pointed them in the right direction, and creating something concrete. And that's actually pretty exciting. So I think the other thing we could do is grow on that. You and I have talked about Dream Start and a few other DFSPs, Paul. I think with their quality, I would think their quantity, we can actually paint a picture here. And you said, what's the size of the task? I think initially we can have something really going by the next convening. And I think 6 months we can actually achieve a lot, because there's It's already happening. We're already on that picture. What you're doing is solidifying the vision and making sure that everybody's on the same page. So I think that helps a lot.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Next on the list is Greg and fraud management, proof of concept. Greg, you're online. I can see you.
Yeah,
There you are.
do you mind if I share?
No, go. I'll stop sharing.
All right. Oops.
Okay, there you go.
So you asked me something I had already been working on. And so I was able to modify some slides to discuss this. So we're looking for POCs. We're working aggressively on this because we need to work with real world data. We need to get out there. We're already ready to go at that point. So as far as tasks required to get to this point, there are none. We're there, right? I want to stress this one slide again. We are this portion in orange, right? To do what we do and make decisions on fraud and things, we need access to other data, which does include KYC data. So discussions with the regulators and things like that are very important at an early stage, because we may be required as a switch to have access to this data, to have it on hand. That has happened before, right? And it's caused problems before. So normally a switch doesn't have that type of data, which means we can't do certain types of fraud patterns and things like that. But usually I put this slide up here simply because, you know, this concept of transaction monitoring is phrased inappropriately at organizations all the time, every day. And I do that because I try to get a level set. There's at least 3 different categories of work that are called transaction monitoring, which is not what we do, and is not accurate. I'll pop past this real quick. This context needs to be thought through, right? How would you operate within the environment? How are we going to deploy this? So we need to come up with a correct model, whether it's semi-attached, which is you know, let's call it a semi-approved model, if you will. But other people may need different models. That has to be thought through, right? So how organizationally does this run? So we're looking for proof of concepts. The product's ready now. The start date is as soon as we can meet. I've got 7 different organizations I'm talking to. Yes, that's the Works and TerraPay are 2. You know, but what I need folks to define their POC, right? And it's got to have the real data, and it needs to be in their environment. It needs to really be performed by them so that we get the best learning out of that. Obviously, it's with a significant amount of help from us, but in your environment, utilizing your data, embedded in using your tooling. You know, Cyber has offered up their admin consoles and their other tools. If you don't have anything, and at least during the evaluation period, that would be, you know, provided for you. Then whatever deal you guys would make as far as going forward, that's between you and them. You know, obviously we're looking for, you know, the benefits, learn, evaluate. The only costs are your staff and your systems. And hey, if you like it, you keep it. You just saved a lot of money. So I get all this type of feedback. I'm not going to go into that, but it's important to me because I get all this information. You know, is my installation process good? Is my integration good? You know, is it really easy to customize, et cetera? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but this slide is the one that I wanted to talk about. So that assessment phase where you decide what we do, what the regulators do, all this stuff has to be done. You know, what types of fraud are you looking to solve? Is it account takeover? Is it scams? Is it push payments? In what area? And that's not as important here because it's Mojaloop, right? But you know, I'm talking to Bankserve, I'm talking to Joe Pack in Jordan, I'm talking to Pix in Brazil. So it's important for me to pick an area like, am I dealing with ACH, real-time payments, or what am I dealing with? TITSA obviously, MFI, things like that. So you have to figure all these things out. And then what do I have available from all these other core systems as far as information? So information is key for running typologies. We need that data, right? The more data, the more typologies we can run, the more fraud checks we can run. But basically the first part of this all is going to be this massive assessment of what are we doing? What are we getting our hands on? What does this look like? And what is the shape? After that, it's just a regular IT project, right? So with planning and everything else, the biggest part that's different is there's an extensive amount of ETL mapping and data mapping that'll probably go on, and that's in the middle phase. You asked about timelines, right? So like I said, there's 7 people are interested so far. You're probably talking 3 to 9 months, from fastest to longest for a POC, right? So definition of scope, the analysis and design, build and deploy, test, calibration, write up presentation, right? But the key is you're not going to understand anything that we need to do together without that analysis. We've got to have the analysis work. We've got to have the sign off on what's going to work and make your regulators happy, what all your other constituents. There's a lot of players that need to be happy in this. And those are the early phases of the project. So do you have a POC? We're actively looking. Thank you. That's really all I had.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg. That was great. Are there any questions before we carry on? No. Okay, fine. Thanks, Greg. We'll be trying to put that on a time.
There's one question. There's a question.
Shortly.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just how do we get in touch if we interested?
Just Greg at frms.io. And I'll try to come down in a little bit. I'm feeling, I feel less sickly. I don't think I'm going to get you guys sick anymore. You still have to hear me cough, but I'm going to try to come down after lunch. So greg at frms.io.
Go ahead, Paul.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Okay, moving on. It's actually me next. I'm going to talk about merchant payments and QR push. Pushing a payment using a QR code is trivially easy if you want to do it badly. And I strongly argue against doing a simple put up a QR code, push a payment, simply because it would set expectations too high that we can deliver this tomorrow, and B, if we were to do that, a live deployment would immediately make itself vulnerable to a huge number of fraud and money laundering attacks, and we really want to not go there. So we need to do this properly. We need a merchant registry. We need signed QR codes. We need merchant IDs. We need a mechanism, at least possibly linking with Greg around validating merchant registrations, etc. And we need to have a proper front end process to ensure proper customer authentication. So essentially, that's around building a white label app. That's building a merchant registry and building a QR service, all as bolt-ons onto the Mojaloop hub. It doesn't require any changes to the hub itself. It requires integrations with the Oracle to support straightforward alias translation, and in this case, it's merchant ID to DFSP, etc. Which also requires changes at the DFSP because they have. So we need a merchant acquiring process because they have to understand about merchant IDs and mapping to their own accounts. And that's it. It's actually probably a reasonably large task. The high level design is available now. We'd like to push down into a detailed design and maybe even moving to a simple, relatively simple proof of concept of something which is resilient to fraud from day one. Because it, as Warren has said, if you deploy something out there which is open to fraud, and your only privacy is obscurity, your only security is through obscurity, then you're going to be hit very quickly. So let's not even go there. However, it is one of the keys to achieving scale. So we do need to do it fairly soon. So thank you. And I'm going to move on to Sam. Sam, I asked you to talk about PISP and its various aspects.
Thank you, Paul. So what pillar? I think we are considering this under the pillar 2, isn't it?
Pillar 2.
Pillar
Pillar 2, yeah.
scale. But I think we all understand that there is some overlap between the various pillars here.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, an awful lot of these functions actually cross multiple pillars. Yeah, I agree.
Right. And I don't think, as Steve was saying, we all agree that there is overlap, and sometimes things go between quality of product but PISP, I think, definitely falls under the etching scale at this stage of the project, because everybody is talking about third-party payment initiation and PISP in Mojalo. And there is a lot of interest in fintech industry to be able to connect to Mojalo. So there are, I think, two streams here, Paul, and of course the community here is we not only need to look at the new use cases. So over the course of these 4 days, we saw the need to support multiple new use cases, starting with the bulk support. Even the PISP bootcamp, one of the learnings from that was to support bulk, and then remote payments, merchant payments, as you mentioned. And we were also able to do an entry in the PISP bootcamp where we had the GSP connector, and we talked about using QR codes, but in a PISP setting where it is secure with the authentication and all that. So that is one of the streams, but I also want to emphasize there is a need to consolidate what we have now. So currently we have version 1.0 of the third-party API, but we have version 2.0, which is almost finalized. So we need implementation support for that. There is a lot to do here, but I think it's critical for us to prioritize what we need to do in the time frame in the next 1 or 2 quarters, and then continue with that. If I had input on this, I think we need to focus on being able to demonstrate and use and make accessible what we have now in Mojalo. So develop, I think Paul, you covered in the having like a fintech sandbox, or it can be a simple TTK or Miniloop, but making the functionality available for people to start developing apps and understanding what PISP functionality is about, it probably takes highest priority in my opinion. And then we can, in parallel, Michael and the third party SIG will work on these new use cases we talked about, aligning to the level 1 principles as well. Thank you. Any questions?
No, okay, great. Thank you, Sam. That was exactly to the point. Next was me talking about the need in Pillar 3, the new settlement model. So I'm going to just briefly say, because we've talked about this multiple times, we just haven't done it yet. Our current settlement model has met our requirements up till now, but we're coming up against deployments and potential where we're going to need a more sophisticated settlement model. Particularly in our interaction with other systems, they're each going to have their own separate settlement requirements, and we need to be able to handle multiple settlement models simultaneously, depending on transaction type or source or whatever it may be. Michael has talked about this extensively. I'm just hijacking this because I don't want to impose too much on Michael and make him talk about everything. So this to me is quite a high priority item. It's probably not the biggest task in the world, but it does affect the core. So things are naturally sensitive and have to be done with a great deal of care. But this is an enabler to a lot of the Pillar 3 stuff. It needs to be done, in my view, before probably most of the other things in Pillar 3. And with that, I'm going to hand straight over to Michael to talk about Forex, cross-border, payments addressing, etc. Michael, are you there? Oh, there he is. Sorry, I'm just looking at a postage stamp over the room. It's difficult to pick people out. There he is.
Okay, I got several things to talk about, so I'm going to make it brief. First of all, currency conversion. We've got a candidate API. We are looking to have that reviewed in the wider context we possibly can. So if you're interested in modular loop schemes which include currency conversion, I'd like to hear from you. We can, once that's approved, then we can start working on use case models to show how it would work in practice. And also, I think, on trying to identify potential foreign exchange providers who might be interested in fulfilling the role of foreign exchange providers in modular loop schemes. We will need to identify those people, talk to them, find out how we can generate an attractive business model that'll make it worthwhile for them to participate while still keeping costs sufficiently low for our customers that they get a service that they can use. So that is, I think it's not a huge task, but again, it's a task that we want to generalize as far as possible. So I want to try and seduce you into joining me by saying you won't have to do that much, but it's very important that you do something. Next up, payments addressing. Now, I've talked earlier this community meeting, I meant to say, about the problems associated with payment addressing, and in particular with making sure that payments are unique, that identifiers are unique, where people may not have a very strong idea of how to uniquify, nice word, a particular kind of identifier. And in my mind, at least, that's going to mean for the modular loop community, starting to think about what the implications of moving from, for instance, mobile phone numbers, MSDNs, as the base form of identification, to moving towards national identification numbers of various kinds, and those sorts of things. And in particular, what might be involved in trying to make sure that the different kinds of national identifier can be properly distinguished from each other. I know that the Nexus project, whom we've been talking to, are doing that sort of work already. So we will want to continue working with them to make sure that we wind up, hopefully, with a solution that's right for both of us. And of course, there's also the MOSIP side of things, where they are offering a way for identifiers to be genuinely unique. So that's what we're going with. Next up, other payment systems, connecting modular loop to others payment systems. We have a model for doing that. It's what we're calling a cross-network provider. We're currently engaged in some proofs of concept using cross-network providers to show how payment requests that are initiated in other systems can be fulfilled in modular loop systems. And that's going to include, obviously, the difficulties that may be associated with regulators, and in particular, where, for instance, financial institutions have a remittance license, whether that remittance license can be transferred to the small institutions who may be the recipients of the payment. So there are a number of potential regulation aspects to this. We propose to continue with these proofs of concept. Obviously, we'll keep you posted. But again, anybody who's interested in working on this, we'd be very interested to talk to them. The use case that we haven't looked at up to now is where payments originate in a modular loop system, but are executed in some other system. Now, I would be kind of surprised if that doesn't have its own set of problems associated with it. So anyone who might be interested in exploring that use case, figuring out the problems and thinking of good ways to meet them, I'd be interested to talk to. Next up, Interledger. So we've had talks for a while now with the Interledger folks. Those have crystallized now into an intention on our part, or both our parts, to create a cross-network provider which will enable any Interledger-enabled financial institution anywhere in the world to route payments to a customer who belongs to a financial institution which is part of a Moduloop scheme. So we are planning to build that over the next PI, I hope. And with a bit of luck, we will have something to demonstrate to you at the next PI. Again, this question, it's fine this way round. How does it work the other way around? It's one where, as I say, the payment is initiated in the Moduloop network, but executed somewhere in the ILP space. And in particular, that's going to impact on addressing, because ILP, of course, has its own way of addressing things. So anyway, we will we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But again, if anybody has any interest in these matters, we'd be very happy to hear from you. Finally, although it's not on my list of things to talk about, I'm going to talk about it anyway. ISO 20022. Now, I'm going to make a strong plea to people in the room. When I go and talk to the ISO 20022 standards organization, they persist in referring to the stuff that we want to do as Moduloop stuff. Well, of course, it is Moduloop stuff, but we think it's solving a set of problems which anybody who wants to provide a low-cost switch, which includes small non-traditional banks and other financial institutions, is going to have to solve. So I am very interested to try and widen the scope of our debate, so that when I go to talk to the ISO 20022 people, they don't say, oh yeah, here's that guy from Moduloop again. They say, ah, here's the representative of the things that anybody who wants to put in a financial institution in emerging economies, emerging jurisdictions, is going to have to solve. And that's why we need to solve it. Actually, we think these is also solving problems which people in the current ISO 20022 world, the big banks and the card companies, are eventually going to have to solve themselves. They just don't know it yet. But fortunately, we've got the Moduloop Foundation to come along and set them straight. So please, anybody who is able to make those kinds of contributions, again, come and talk to me. What I would like to do, as I explained, is to break down our application into smaller chunks. And that will mean that earlier than would otherwise have been the case, we'll be looking for support for people to set up and test the new forms of message, the new ISO 20022 forms of messages, make sure they're correct, make sure they're robust, because we will need to do that work. ISO won't do that work for us. So I plan, hopefully, to start holding regular updates and progress meetings. So, and again, anyone who would like to attend those, please get in touch with me. And I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. You killed 4 birds with 1 stone. So thank you very much. Terrific. Just to reassure people, we've only got a couple more to go, and then there'll be a coffee break before we get into the road mapping session itself. The next 2 were me. The DPG ecosystem, and I don't propose to say anything else about that because Tom jumped in and covered it for me, so that's great. And similarly, integration with digital ID, which essentially means initially at least MOSIP. I think that's I've covered that as well. I just wanted to say there is a set of process flows that I've already developed on how we work with MOSIP. MOSIP is not a straightforward digital ID system. It is privacy preserving, at least in regard to anybody who uses MOSIP IDs. There might be questions around privacy of the MOSIP service itself, which unsettles some people. But so far as service providers go, there is a privacy preserving function which makes integration with and operation of a MOSIP integration not straightforward, but we do have answers to it. We do understand how it works, and we have some proposals around that. So again, that comes down to the DPG ecosystem again, and working with all of those parties to develop first a demo, and then hopefully a full proof of concept. Beyond that, all of the changes around that are limited to the Oracle. If we do it properly, if we influence the shape of that integration, we don't have to do anything with the hub. It's all around the Oracle. So thank you. And moving quickly on, the next one is actually Suji, who I was going to ask to talk about development in CBDC. Hi, Suji.
Hey, Paul, thank you very much. May I share my screen?
Yeah, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, rather morning. I guess it's still morning over there. I'm based out of Singapore. My name is Suji. I'm the Director of Engineering for CBDC Center of Excellence based out of Singapore. Glad to be meeting all of you over the webinar. I saw quite a few faces and hope to know you all better next time around. So from a CBDC perspective, I mean, we are still in the process of coming out with what is CBDC Center of Excellence, what are we going to do, what is the scope of it. All these things are still being worked out. In fact, I came on board only last week. So as you know, it is still in a very initial stage of coming out with what is the scope over there and how we are going to enable it and how we will integrate with the rest of our system. But I do have a high level view, which I had discussed with Paul and others. So what we do is that our scope is primarily on the wholesale part of the CBDC initially, because the retail part is already covered under the Modular Foundation Core. And what we wanted to do is create a solution or an appropriate framework and an implementation method for enabling the wholesale actions of the CBDC. So the wholesale actions can cover a lot of things, all the way from the mining of the CBDC, creation of it, all the way to the distribution to the initial distributors of the CBDC, like the key financial intermediary. And from intermediaries, financial intermediary, it goes to the general public. Because we have already covered the Modular Foundation Core already covers the retail function. What we are doing is that we are only covering the high-level wholesale function. What we need to cover and how much we will cover on each year and what is our roadmap, and all these things are currently not being worked on. So as a part of that, we are thinking of coming out with a working group that can cover both business and the technical. And we are getting feedback from Paul and Miller and others, and even Michael, to say that how we want to set it up and how we will be going ahead with that and how we will integrate with the Modular Foundation Core. What are the integration points from a CBDC, COE, CBDC solution with the existing Modular Foundation Core. So all those things are currently up for discussion, and we are currently in the process of setting up, I mean, what are the key dependencies we need to do is that we are in the process of setting up working groups to bring out a lot of people together. I believe an announcement will be made very soon, maybe before end of this event or early next week, on the technical working group and the key invitee list, and there will be an invitation open as well. So we'll be announcing the formation of the working group to bring all the parties together. And we are currently envisioning, and what I say now could be changing anytime of the later on, because we are still under discussion with the key Modular Foundation senior leaders to say that what is going to be the governance of it. We are still working it out. But we foresee that potentially we'll be having a business working group working through the regulations and policies. And there's a technical working group coming through the integration part of it, how we integrate it, how we create our solution, what are the key integration points with the rest of the retail, and how the cross-border and how the Forex and everything will be working. So these are the things, integration, we need to work without. And as a part of the technical group, we need to define the scope of it. What are we going to do? And we, like I mentioned earlier, within the next 1 or 2 weeks, we will be announcing the formation of the technical working group or the working groups in for the CBDC COE. I have already heard, I mean, on my director over there, Nick is already there in Zanzibar. We have received few interest of people want to come into the technical working group, and we will be publishing an invitation for everyone to come through as well. So few help I may need from you, all of you, is that please be come forward, help to get the CBDC, because digital currency is going to be the future of the currency, whether we like it or not. And that is how the currencies will be working on, and that is the future of the currency. So we want to have, I mean, currently a lot of organizations of lot of proof of concept as going across the world on multiple countries on CBDCs. And there was few MPVs also, MVPs also created as a part of the central bank digital currency. But we, as a coming as a modular foundation, we will be creating a solution to address this wholesale part of the CBDC. And I would like to get to the team or to the audience to say that, do you have any questions that you want to ask me at this point of time?
None, Suji.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
That is good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Suji. That was great. Moving on quickly, because I'm conscious of time. Would you mind not sharing your screen anymore? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And our last session before the coffee break is going to be Pedro, and talking about VNext. Please, Pedro, you there? Oh, yes, there you are.
Thanks, Paul. So quality product and the contribution VNext, it's been a long journey. And for the past 3 years, we've been at this journey. It started with the theory that we had about how to unlock the next level of performance and scalability ahead of the curve. So, and we had this theory, and Miguel and I worked at a prototype. We managed to confirm the theory and managed to provide us recipe and how do we do this for the future. This was a very important step. After this, we went on to the reference architecture exercise. And I have to say, I've led quite a few exercises like this in a lot of different places, in a lot of, all of them companies. And this was the first time that I was doing this in an open source community, which is, I was skeptical at first. But then what happened is that we had a very wide adoption. Everyone was contributing. Everyone was having super passionate discussions. I contributed with my fair share, obviously. But in the end, we were agreeing with pretty much everything that we designed. And I have to say, I was not expecting that at the end, we would produce a reference architecture that everyone was agreeing, not exactly with all of the details, that never happens, that's a dream, but we had something that we all believed was very interesting. It was very truthful, was something that we had to achieve. How we got to that step of achieving it, that would be another story. Yeah. That's the step. So anyway, the point is, we then made the decision that we're going to, in parallel, build this VNext approach so that we can have the next iteration ready, probably in the next year. And we are now in that stable part of the build of this project. So what it means is that we built the foundation. We have the cross-cutting concerns working. We have a lot of the hard work built already. It's still in alpha. It's not working as it should, but it's there. It exists. And we're in the cruise phase of it. So we're now building the actual functionality. We're building the accounts and balances and delivering the participant lifecycle and the account lookup and all of that all of the functionality that makes Moduloop. So vNext is starting to resemble Moduloop, still doesn't do transfers. My point is, we have a roadmap. We have a very small team that is focused, but it's in high delivery mode. So we're now going much faster. We still don't have enough capacity. So we do have a roadmap. We want to deliver the alpha release, which is just for developers, in Q2 next year. We need as much help as we can get. So if you have time to participate, to collaborate, to help, please reach out, because we need people to help us deliver this. So thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. That's great. Okay, that's the last one. I know that's an awful lot to cover, but I would suggest that we'll have a coffee break now before we move into the interactive road mapping session.
All right, so
thank you,
we'll
everyone.
take, literally, we're trying to catch up with time. So if you could grab your coffee, come back, we'll start in exactly 5 minutes.